Okay, my friends, it is Monday, March 17th, 2025, and I have three big stories for today. The first one's kind of a big story. It's talking about the negotiations and the back and forth and that sort of thing. The last one, I don't even know what to make of it. I want to know what you think about it, like what's going to happen next as a consequence. So stay with me to that. Okay, Trump to call Putin on 18 March, that's tomorrow, to discuss ending the war in Ukraine, according to Reuters. Negotiations will focus on land and power plants. According to Trump, he seeks to secure Putin's support for a 30-day ceasefire already accepted by Ukraine. We know about all that. Here's what he had to say most recently. Here we are.
I have something to announce maybe by Tuesday. I'll be speaking to President Putin on Tuesday. And a lot of work's been done over the weekend. We want to see if we can bring that war to an end. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I think we have a very good chance. I think we'll, be talking about land. It's a lot of land. It's a lot different than it was before the wars, And we'll be talking about land. We'll be talking about power plants. That's up, it's a big question. But I think we have a lot of it already discussed very much by both sides.
You'll ask him.
Ukraine and Russia.
You'll ask him.
We're already talking about that. Dividing up certain assets.
Okay, dividing up certain assets. Okay, so we're going to come back to that, dividing up the assets bit in just a little bit. In the meantime, Hungary was retreating after one call. Hungary dropped its veto on extending EU sanctions against Russia after a call between Foreign Minister Szijjártó and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, according to Politico. Budapest initially threatened to block the sanctions, citing Trump's White House return, but after Trump warned of Russia of new sanctions, if it refused a ceasefire, the stance shifted. But why can't they do that about Ukraine? They can do that here with this particular topic, or they could do this with the Houthis, but they can't seem to figure out how to do this with Ukraine. And right, I don't want the United States to be a broker in this deal. I want the United States to back Ukraine to keep the Russians out of Ukraine. And that's what they should be doing, and they've replaced themselves with that. Okay. Meanwhile, Hungary is threatening to block EU military aid to Ukraine. Foreign Minister Szijjártó said he stated that Hungary will not allow taxpayer money to fund weapons shipments to Ukraine and instead advocates for peace negotiations. A $20 billion aid package is being discussed at today's EU foreign ministers meeting. We'll keep an eye on that. Of course, that seems like an alibi to not do things or to get some kind of concessions so that you can get something for it. Like, if you just watch what Hungary does, they always say, no, we're not going to do this. But if you give me that, I'll go with you. Okay, back to the main story. U.S. under Trump imposed the toughest sanctions on Russia to date after the Kremlin rejected the proposed 30-day ceasefire. Russian banks can no longer process internal energy transactions, endangering the Kremlin's primary war funding mechanism. Okay, but this is just that Trump didn't renew something that was already created by the Biden administration that was put in place to do this, except that the Biden administration would also give this like an extension of like a waiver every 6 months. So, I mean, I don't even know who to blame at this point. But you can't like give him a great victory lap for something that the Biden era did, but then didn't actually enforce. And you can't give Biden the credit. It hurts my head. Okay, it's not clear exactly what Waltz meant. What are we talking about? U.S. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz said on March 16th that Ukraine will receive unspecified security guarantees in exchange for unspecified territorial concessions. So they're already talking about concessions, but hopefully with some guarantees that keep this from happening again. But so I already don't like half the deal. Waltz also stated that the United States is considering the reality of the situation on the ground, which I thought was really troubling language because usually you hear Russia talk about that. Like in diplomatic talks, when discussing an end to the war in Ukraine, Russia's the one that does that. It's not clear exactly what Waltz meant by the reality of the situation on the ground. Russian officials frequently use that narrative in negotiations to say you must consider the realities on the ground, to consider the current front line in Ukraine. But Waltz's acknowledgement that Ukraine will receive unspecified security guarantees is a key aspect of achieving U.S. President Donald Trump's stated goal of securing a lasting peace. Nevertheless, stopping hostilities in an indefensible lines would limit the effectiveness of these guarantees. Like if you just froze it exactly where it is, that could be problematic. Now, the Kremlin continues to ask for maximalist territorial claims over all of occupied Ukraine, even parts of Ukraine that they don't occupy, all 4 oblasts. Ukraine's foreign minister has made it clear Russia has no right to impose conditions on a ceasefire. They're saying, wait, we can't have even a ceasefire unless certain things happen in place. So they should have no vote on Ukraine's alliances, no limits on Ukraine's military strength, no security there's security guarantees that are already in motion that they're working on. Russia can't object to these things in order to come to a ceasefire. Now, here is Kaja Kallas, and Lithuanian security chief, also slamming Russia's peace conditions, and they're calling it a smokescreen, which I think that's very fair.
Well,
there you go.
Those conditions that they have presented, it shows that they don't really want peace, actually, because they are presenting as conditions all their ultimate goals that they want to achieve from the war. The Council said that we need to move swiftly, and that is what we are doing. Well,
we require from Ukraine unconditional position when we see so many conditions from Putin's side. And we see the real intent, and there is no place for peace in Putin's imperialist plan. That is obvious, and these actions show more than the words for themselves.
Yeah, there is no place for peace in Putin's imperial ambitions, and so, well, I mean, not until Putin takes everything, and then he'll declare that there should be peace. Anyone familiar with Putin and Russia knows that the chance for peace are virtually zero. This is commentary from Tendar. He says, we have been here multiple times and failed 100%. This war is only raging because Putin and his ilk never believed in peace or international treaties. The track record is clear, and it will not suddenly start to be different. To say that a ceasefire is the best that can be achieved would be exaggerated, because it would only happen if Putin believes that it benefits him. Spot on. That's exactly what Richard Nixon said about the Soviets like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Okay. Russia proposes deploying unarmed civilian mission. How about that? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Unarmed civilian mission in Ukraine as part of a peace deal to monitor its implementation and demand security guarantees, including Kyiv's neutrality. Yeah, that's what they need, is unarmed folks that can do absolutely nothing, so that when the fighting starts again, they can do nothing about it. Meanwhile, Macron was saying, how about we send troops to Ukraine, which Russia really doesn't want. France and the UK are leading a coalition of the willing to station troops in key Ukrainian locations after a ceasefire with Russia. Macron says it's not a mass deployment, but a security guarantee. Several nations are ready to join. Now, do you think that Putin wants French and UK soldiers among maybe Polish, who knows, whoever else? Italy said it wouldn't do it, but who knows, whatever, German soldiers on the Russian border? That's even worse than where they are right now, so they'll never want that. Okay. And this idea that civilian monitors, I just talked about from the little clip about this, Russia doesn't want potential peace agreement monitors in Ukraine to be armed. Also, for a peace agreement, Ukraine should be neutral, and a NATO defensive alliance should be formally bar Kyiv's entry. Like, that's everything that they want, and nothing that Ukraine wants. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko has said, according to the Russian media. Earlier this month, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that the potential deployment of European troops in Ukraine would mean NATO's official and direct involvement in the war. So, okay, but you have North Korean troops in Europe. So, okay, you just gotta. They keep calling these red line. Call their bluff. Okay. Meanwhile, Modi is actually saying something semi-useful and semi-not useful. Let's hear what he has to say.
I have a close relationship with Russia and Ukraine alike. I can sit with President Putin and say that this is not the time for war.
Okay, I don't think Putin will listen, but okay.
And I can also tell President Zelensky in a friendly way that, brother, regardless of how many people stand with you in the world, there will never be a resolution on the battlefield.
Well, not if we keep slow walking aid, that's for sure. But if we were actually to give them all the legitimate weapons that they need.
The resolution will only come when both Ukraine and Russia come to the negotiating table. Ukraine may hold countless discussions with their allies, but it will bear no fruit. Discussions must include both parties instead. Initially, it was challenging to find peace, but now the current situation presents an opportunity for meaningful and productive talks between Ukraine and Russia.
So Modi could actually be a legitimate voice, but he's way too interested in Russian oil to actually be an honest broker. Just like the U.S. shouldn't be an honest broker between the two of them. The U.S. should simply arm Ukraine. Okay, 11 years of occupation. Turkey stands firm on Crimea. Remember, the people that were in Crimea are related to the Turks far more than other people groups, and they're not happy about that. On the anniversary of Russia's sham referendum in Crimea, Turkey reaffirms it does not recognize the illegal annexation. All right, now, so that's all about the ceasefire and all that kind of like how we're going to make a deal, how we're going to, okay. Next big story is Russia's still just doing stupid stuff, hybrid warfare with the rest of Europe. Here is Russia's GRU behind the Ikea arson. Lithuania officially accuses Russian military intelligence of orchestrating the May 9th arson attack on an Ikea store in Vilnius. The suspect, he was a teen, a recruit for T. He was allegedly paid 10,000 euros to set fires in Lithuania and Latvia as part of a Kremlin-backed intimidation campaign. The suspect hid a timed incendiary device in Ikea, fled to Warsaw, received a BMW 530 as payment. He was caught en route to Latvia while retrieving his cash for another attack. Lithuanian prosecutors claim the Russian intelligence provided encrypted instructions, training, and funding to a wider network of operatives targeting EU states. And you say, yeah, but that's just one isolated incident. Okay, well, how about this? Authorities in Romania have charged 6 men with treason, accusing them of planning to spread propaganda and infiltrate institutions and rally 2 million people for a coup. So this is Radio Free Europe, which we'll talk about in just a moment. How they understand what has happened
here. A lawyer and a Russian deputy military attaché met at a Bucharest restaurant in January to plot the overthrow of the Romanian government. The next day, the lawyer, Adrian Robertin Dinu, and his fellow Romanian, Marius Semeniuc, boarded a flight to Istanbul and then to Moscow. There they met with 2 men. One is a Russian intelligence agent and the other a Ukrainian citizen who faces jail in Ukraine for endangering national security. The Romanians handed over 5,000 euros and presented a 10-step plan to take over the government. The plan? Spread propaganda, infiltrate state institutions, and gather 2 million people for a mass rally leading to a coup. These men are part of a group of 6 accused of treason in Romania. Dinu and Semeniuc are in pre-trial detention. The Russian colonel Yevgeny Ignatiev was expelled from Romania for espionage. How is this tied to Romania's political crisis? The prosecution says they have a recording of one of the suspects, Raul Lupu, saying that other conspirators are in league with banned presidential candidate Calin Georgescu.
Okay, this is Radio Free Liberty, Radio Free Europe, and it's just been, defunded by the Trump administration. Now, the Czech foreign minister, Jan Lipevsky, said that he will raise the issue of possible European support for a Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, after the U.S. government has moved to cut the broadcaster's funding, sparking concern over silencing of pro-democracy media. I think this is a terrible thing to cut that. I think there are plenty of things to cut that is wasteful within the U.S. government. This is not one of those things that I would think is a legitimate thing to cut. Now, look at the reporting that they've done. And yeah, so the Kremlin is celebrating as Trump cuts the key source of information about Russia's crimes in occupied Ukraine. If the Kremlin's celebrating about this, it's probably not a good sign. And this was some commentary by Jason J. Smart. Truly sad to see Voice of America silenced by the White House. Its impact on the former USSR and beyond can't be overstated. Dozens have told me that it gave them hope and belief in America during communism's darkest days. And then he has his last line. But don't worry, Musk's federal subsidies are safe. Hey, you know what? We should be looking at what federal subsidies is SpaceX and so forth and so on getting. Okay. This one hurt me. This just hurt my heart. This is Stanislav Asiev. He's a Ukrainian journalist, a founder of the Justice Initiative Fund, Free Media Awards 2020, National Freedom and Expression Award. Okay. I once received an electric shock during torture only for writing for Radio Liberty. I was told that it was a CIA structure and an enemy of Russia. And for that reason alone, I was already guilty. Now the enemy of Russia is being destroyed by America itself, and my torture seems doubly in vain. That just hurts my heart. Okay. Michael McFaul put this on X. Secretary Rubio, you really support closing down Radio Marti? That's the Cuban version of Radio Free Liberty, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia. Really? I can't believe it. You've been a champion of freedom for Cuba for too long. I'm going to reserve judgment until I hear from you personally that you endorse this terrible decision. Yeah, way to call him out and ask the question. Okay. This is the third story, and the one that I'm just like, what? Okay, Zelensky's global army. This is in Nexta. Ukraine's president has signed a law allowing the deployment of Ukrainian forces abroad during martial law. Remember, all men are supposed to stay in the country during martial law. Under this new legislation, Ukrainian troops can operate outside the country for national security and deterring aggression, protecting Ukraine's sovereignty, self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Is Ukraine preparing to act beyond its borders? How will this impact Kyiv's military strategy? Well, the first thing that came to my mind, but this is pure speculation, is, you got this little enclave of Kaliningrad sandwiched between Lithuania and Poland, and maybe there's some stuff there that you could take. I don't know. We'll see how that would all play out. But the Lithuanians didn't want it. The Poles didn't want it because there weren't Lithuanians or Poles there. It was a German enclave. And so after World War II, that changed. All right. Last little thing. This charming lady, this is a good overview of the Russian mind, according to Anton Georgescu. This charming lady is saying this about Ukrainians. Until we destroy them all, we can't finish until we destroy them. Do you think that there are a lot